The invitation came on a Tuesday in March, and I swear my hands shook for 10 minutes straight after I opened it. Cream paper, fancy gold letters, the kind of wedding invitation that costs more than I used to make in a week at the fire station. Sarah Elizabeth Martinez requests your presence at her wedding ceremony. Martinez. Not Thompson. Not my name. I sat in my kitchen staring at that piece of paper like it might disappear if I blinked too hard. My daughter was getting married and she had a different last name. The man who'd raised her after I got kicked out of her life had given her his name. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. 12 years. It had been 12 years since I'd last seen Sarah face to face. She was 8 when everything went to hell. Just a little girl with pigtails who used to climb into my lap every morning and ask me to read her the funny papers while she ate her cereal. Now she was 20, getting married. And I was finding out about it through a formal invitation like I was some distant relative nobody really wanted there, but felt obligated to invite. The return address said Denver, Colorado. I didn't even know she lived in Colorado. Last I heard, Linda had moved them to Phoenix, but that was 5 years ago when my private investigator still sent me updates. Yeah, I hired a private investigator to keep track of my own kids. That's how messed up my life had become. I set the invitation down on my kitchen counter, right next to the coffee mug Sarah had made me in second-grade art class. It was crooked and painted with more enthusiasm than skill, with "World's Best Dad" written in purple finger paint. I'd kept it all these years, even though Linda had told the kids I threw away everything that reminded me of them when I abandoned them. That was Linda's word, abandoned. Like I just packed up one day and decided being a father was too much work. Like I hadn't fought tooth and nail for 2 years trying to keep my kids in my life. Like I hadn't spent every penny I had on lawyers who promised they could fix things, and then shrugged when the judge handed full custody to my ex-wife. I picked up my phone and called the only person who knew the whole story. My old partner from the fire department, Captain Rodriguez. We'd worked together for 15 years, and he'd watched the whole mess happen in real time. "Dave?" His voice was gruff but warm. "How you doing, brother?" "I got an invitation to Sarah's wedding." Silence on the other end. Rodriguez knew what that meant. He'd been there when I'd gotten the divorce papers, when I'd lost the custody battle, when I'd finally stopped driving to Arizona every other weekend because seeing my kids for 2 supervised hours just made everything worse. "That's good news, right? She wants you there." "I don't know what she wants. Maybe she just felt guilty not inviting me. Maybe Linda made her do it. Or maybe she's 20 years old and smart enough to ask her own questions now." Rodriguez was right, but I'd been disappointed too many times to get my hopes up. Still, I found myself pulling out a pen and checking "will attend" on the RSVP card. The next few weeks passed in a blur of anxiety and planning. I bought a new suit, the first one I'd owned since the divorce. I got a haircut and tried to figure out what you bring as a wedding gift for a daughter you haven't spoken to in 12 years. I settled on the pearl necklace my mother had left for Sarah, the one I'd been keeping in a safety deposit box all this time, waiting for the right moment. I also did something I hadn't done in years. I pulled out all the boxes I'd been storing in my closet, the ones filled with pictures and school projects and birthday cards my kids had made me before everything fell apart. I wanted to remember who Sarah used to be before I tried to figure out who she'd become. The pictures hit me hard. Sarah at 3, gap-toothed and grinning, sitting on my shoulders at the zoo. Sarah at 5, dressed as a princess for Halloween, holding my hand while we went trick-or-treating. Sarah at 7, proud as anything in her soccer uniform, holding up the trophy her team had won. I remembered that soccer season. I'd been working crazy hours at the station, pulling double shifts to pay for the divorce lawyer, but I never missed one of her games. Even if I showed up still smelling like smoke from whatever fire we'd just put out, I was there on the sideline cheering for her. But Linda's lawyer had a different story to tell the judge. He made it sound like I was never around, like I cared more about playing hero at work than being a father at home. He had pictures too, shots of empty seats at school plays when I was working, missed birthday parties when I was pulling someone out of a burning building. The judge ate it up. Here's Linda, a steady accountant with regular hours, and Carlos, a successful surgeon who could provide stability and financial security. And here's me, a firefighter who worked nights and weekends and might not come home one day because my job was dangerous. When you put it like that, it was easy to see why they gave Linda full custody. What they didn't talk about was how I'd requested every weekend off for 6 months to attend those school events, how I'd traded shifts with other guys, worked holidays I should have had off, just so I could be at my kids' games and concerts. But none of that mattered in court. What mattered was that Linda could paint me as an absent father, and I couldn't prove otherwise because I'd been too busy actually being there to document it properly. The flight to Denver was rough. Not the flying part, but sitting there for 2 hours with nothing to do but think about all the ways this could go wrong. What if Sarah had only invited me out of obligation? What if she was angry and wanted to confront me? What if she'd turned into someone I didn't recognize? Someone who believed all of Linda's stories about what kind of father I'd been. I'd booked a hotel room near the venue, nothing fancy but clean and quiet. The kind of place where a guy on a fire department pension could afford to stay without feeling stupid about it. Carlos was a surgeon, after all. He probably didn't think twice about dropping $500 on a hotel room. That first night in Denver, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the last time I'd seen my kids. Sarah was 16, standing in our old driveway in Phoenix with tears streaming down her face, screaming that she never wanted to see me again. Michael was right behind her, 14 and trying to look tough, but mostly just looking confused. "You abandoned us," Sarah had yelled. "Mom was right about you. You don't care about anyone but yourself." I'd tried to explain, tried to tell her that I'd never abandoned them, that I'd been fighting to see them for 3 years. But she wouldn't listen. Linda had spent 8 years filling their heads with poison, and by the time they were teenagers, they believed every word of it. That was the last time I'd driven to Arizona. I couldn't handle seeing the hate in my daughter's eyes anymore. Couldn't stand watching my son flinch every time I tried to hug him. So I'd stopped visiting, stopped calling, stopped trying to force my way into their lives. But I never stopped loving them. I never stopped hoping that someday they'd want to know the truth. The wedding was set for Saturday in June at some fancy resort in the mountains outside Denver. Friday morning, I woke up to my phone ringing, unknown Colorado number. "Hello? Dad?" My heart stopped. It was Sarah's voice, but deeper now, more mature. The voice of a woman, not the little girl I remembered. "Sarah? Sweetheart, is that you?" "Yeah, it's me." She sounded nervous, like she wasn't sure this was a good idea. "I heard you were coming to the wedding." "You invited me." "I know. I wasn't sure you'd actually show up." The words cut deep because I knew why she'd think that. Linda had spent years telling the kids that I was unreliable, that I made promises I couldn't keep, that I'd already proven I didn't want to be part of their lives. "Sarah, I haven't missed anything important to you by choice. Not ever." Silence on the other end. Then, "We need to talk." Before the wedding. "There are things Mom told me that I need to understand." My hands started shaking again. "What kind of things?" "About why you left. About the divorce. About why you stopped trying to see us." "Where do you want to meet?" She gave me the address of a coffee shop downtown, said she could be there in an hour. I spent that hour pacing around my hotel room, practicing conversations in my head, trying to prepare myself for any possible outcome. The coffee shop was busy, full of people who looked like they had normal families and normal problems. I got there early and picked a corner table where we could have some privacy. Then I sat there nursing a cup of coffee that tasted like burnt water and watching the door like my life depended on it. When Sarah walked in, I almost didn't recognize her. She was beautiful, obviously, but it was more than that. She carried herself with confidence, like someone who'd been loved and supported her whole life. Which I guess she had been, just not by me. She was tall now, about 5'6", with long dark hair and my mother's green eyes. She wore jeans and a sweater that probably cost more than my car payment, and when she smiled at the barista, I could see the little girl who used to light up every room she entered. She spotted me right away and walked over, moving like she was going to her own execution. Hi, Dad. The words sounded strange coming from her, like she was speaking a foreign language. Hi, baby girl. She sat down across from me, and for a minute we just stared at each other. She'd ordered her coffee black, no sugar, same as me. Some things, I guess, are genetic. You look good, she said finally. Older, but good. You look incredible. You always were the prettiest little girl in any room. That made her smile, a real one this time, and for just a second I could see the 8-year-old who used to show me her loose teeth and ask me to help her write letters to the tooth fairy. I need to ask you something, she said, getting straight to business in a way that reminded me of my own mother. And I need you to tell me the truth, even if it makes you look bad. I'll always tell you the truth, Sarah. That's a promise. Why did you leave us? There it was. The question I'd been dreading and hoping for in equal measure for 12 years. Sarah, I never left you. I was forced out. She frowned. What do you mean? Forced out. Mom said you chose your job over your family. She said you told her you didn't want the responsibility of being a father anymore. The lie was so brazen, so completely opposite to the truth, that it took my breath away. But I could see Linda's logic. If you're going to rewrite history, you might as well make it a complete rewrite. Your mother filed for divorce when you were 8, I said carefully. She wanted full custody and permission to move you and Michael to Colorado with Carlos. I fought it. You fought it? For 2 years. I spent every penny I had on lawyers, took every parenting class the court required, did everything they asked me to do. But Linda made sure the judge heard about every soccer game I missed because I was working, every school play I couldn't attend because someone's house was on fire and they needed help. Sarah's coffee sat getting cold while she processed this information. She said you signed away your parental rights voluntarily. She said you told the lawyer you were done being a father. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to the email I'd saved from my lawyer 12 years ago, showing her the court order that proved I'd never signed away my parental rights. This says you were awarded visitation rights. Every other weekend, alternating holidays. That's right. But your mother made those visits as difficult as possible. She'd schedule activities for you kids during my weekends. She'd tell you I was unreliable when I had to cancel because of work emergencies. She'd supervise every conversation to make sure I didn't contradict the story she was telling you about why we got divorced. I remember those visits, Sarah said quietly. You always seemed sad. I was heartbroken. I was watching my children slip away from me, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. Every visit, you were a little more distant, a little more convinced that I didn't really want to be there. I reached across the table and took her hand. She didn't pull away. Sarah, do you remember the last time I came to visit? You were 16. I remember. I told you I never wanted to see you again. You said I was a stranger. You said Carlos was your real father. You said I was just causing problems for everyone. Tears started rolling down her cheeks. I believed everything Mom told me, about you choosing work over family, about you not fighting for custody, about you not caring what happened to us. I cared more than you'll ever know. There hasn't been a single day in 12 years that I haven't thought about you and Michael. I've kept track of where you were living, made sure you were safe. I've celebrated your birthdays alone and wondered what you were doing for Christmas. But you stopped coming to see us. I stopped because it was hurting you more than helping. You made it clear that my presence was causing you pain, and I loved you too much to keep doing that. I pulled out my phone and showed her my contact list. Her name was right there at the top, under favorites. But I never stopped hoping. I've written probably 1,000 text messages I never sent. I've started 100 phone calls I never made. I was waiting for a sign that you were ready to hear from me. The wedding invitation. The wedding invitation was everything. It was hope I'd given up on getting. Sarah was crying harder now, but quietly, trying not to make a scene in the crowded coffee shop. I need to ask you about something else, she said. Mom always said you never paid child support, that she and Carlos had to support us entirely on their own. I pulled out another piece of paper, this one more recent. It was a bank statement showing 12 years of automatic withdrawals, every month without fail. $800 a month for 10 years, until you turned 18. Direct deposit from my checking account to your mother's account. I have records for every single payment. Sarah stared at the bank statement like it was written in a language she didn't understand. She said you disappeared and left us with nothing. I also kept the life insurance policy that named you and Michael as beneficiaries. When you turned 18, I started putting money into college funds for both of you. How much? Yours has about $45,000 in it. Michael's has about $38,000. It would have been more, but I had to use some of the money to pay for the private investigators. Private investigators? To keep track of where you were living. Linda moved you guys around a lot, and I needed to know you were safe and healthy. I needed to know if something happened to you, if you needed help, if there was an emergency. Sarah looked around the coffee shop like she was seeing it for the first time. I don't understand. Why would Mom lie about all of this? What did she gain by making us hate you? She gained a clean slate, a new family without the complication of an ex-husband who loved his children and wanted to stay involved in their lives. Carlos is a good man, Sarah. He raised you when I couldn't, and I'll always be grateful to him for that. But your mother wanted you to love him without reservation, without any competing loyalty to me. So she erased you. She tried to. But you can't erase love, sweetheart. You can bury it, you can complicate it, you can poison it with lies and manipulation. But you can't make it disappear entirely. Sarah pulled out her own phone and scrolled through her contacts. I've had your number for 2 years, she said. I got it from Michael when he turned 18 and started asking questions. My heart jumped. How is he? How's your brother? Confused, angry. He started reaching out to people who knew you when we were kids, trying to figure out if Mom's stories were true. He found Captain Rodriguez. Rodriguez. Of course he did. My old partner never could keep his mouth shut when it came to defending his guys. What did Rodriguez tell him? He said you were the best father he'd ever known. He said you carried pictures of us everywhere and talked about us constantly. He said after the divorce, you were never the same. That you did your job, but the joy went out of you. The truth of that hit me like a punch to the chest. Rodriguez was right. The divorce hadn't just cost me my children. It had cost me my identity as a father, the thing that had given my life meaning. He also said you retired early because the stress was killing you, that losing us broke something in you that never healed. I had retired early 3 years ago. Officially, it was because of a back injury, but really it was because every fire I fought, every life I saved, reminded me that I might die without ever making things right with my kids. Michael wants to see you, Sarah continued. He's been working up the courage to call for months. What about you? What do you want? Sarah looked at me with eyes that belonged to the little girl who used to fall asleep on my lap during Saturday morning cartoons. I want to know my father. Not the version Mom created in our heads, but the real person. The man who's been loving me from a distance for 12 years. We talked for 3 more hours. I told her about my life since the divorce, how I'd thrown myself into work to avoid dealing with the pain, how I'd dated a few women but never gotten serious because I couldn't bear the thought of replacing my family with a new one. I told her about the night shift I'd worked for 8 years straight because the days were too quiet, too full of memories. She told me about growing up in Colorado, about Carlos being a good stepfather but never trying to replace me entirely, about always feeling like there was something missing in her life, but not knowing what it was. She told me about her fiancé, Tom, a good man who worked as a teacher and made her laugh. She told me about college and her job, and all the big and small moments I'd missed. Most importantly, she told me about the questions she'd started asking when she turned 18, the way Linda's stories about me had never quite added up, the feeling that there was more to the story than she'd been told. I want you to walk me down the aisle, she said as we were getting ready to leave. I know it's last minute, and I know it might cause problems with Mom and Carlos, but I want my real father to give me away. I started crying then, big embarrassing tears that I couldn't stop. Are you sure? I don't want to cause trouble on your wedding day. Dad, you are my wedding day. Everything else is just details. The rest of Friday passed in a blur of preparation and nervous energy. Sarah had to go handle last-minute wedding stuff, but we made plans to meet early Saturday morning to talk more. I spent the evening in my hotel room, alternating between excitement and terror about what the next day would bring. Saturday morning, Sarah called at 7 a.m. Dad, can you meet me at the venue? I want to show you something. The resort was about an hour outside Denver, tucked into the mountains with views that belonged on postcards. It was the kind of place where rich people got married, all rustic elegance and understated luxury. I felt underdressed in my new suit, but Sarah hugged me like I was wearing a tuxedo. Come on, she said, leading me toward a small building behind the main lodge. I have something for you. Inside was a room set up like a museum exhibit, with pictures and mementos from Sarah's life displayed on tables and easels. But these weren't the usual wedding photos showing the bride growing up. These were pictures of me. There I was holding newborn Sarah in the hospital, looking terrified and amazed in equal measure. There we were at her first birthday party, both of us covered in chocolate cake. There was the picture from her kindergarten graduation, me in my dress uniform because I'd come straight from a ceremony at the fire station. Where did you get these? I asked, my voice barely working. I've been collecting them for 2 years. I got some from Rodriguez, some from our old neighbors, some from Mom's sister who never agreed with what Mom did. Your aunt gave you pictures? Aunt Jenny kept copies of everything. She said Mom tried to throw away all the pictures of you after the divorce, but Jenny saved them because she knew someday we'd want them back. I moved from table to table, seeing my children's childhood through different eyes. Here were all the moments Linda's lawyer had dismissed, all the times I'd been there, all the evidence that I'd been a loving, involved father before everything fell apart. There's something else, Sarah said, leading me to a table in the corner. On it was a scrapbook, thick and worn from being handled. Mom kept this hidden in her bedroom closet. I found it when I was helping her pack for their move last year. I opened the scrapbook, and my heart nearly stopped. It was full of pictures of me and the kids. But more than that, it was full of things Linda had saved. Report cards where teachers mentioned how proud I was of my children's achievements. Thank you cards I'd written to her for letting me take the kids on special outings. Even a few love letters I'd sent her during our marriage, talking about how much I loved being a father. She kept all of this, every piece, even the stuff that contradicted everything she'd been telling us about you. I sat down hard in the nearest chair, overwhelmed by the evidence of a love I'd thought had been completely erased. Sarah, why are you showing me this now? Because I want you to know that some part of her always knew she was wrong. Some part of her never stopped loving the man who gave her the 2 best things in her life. Does she know you found this? She knows. We had a long talk about it last night. She's here, Dad, at the wedding. She wants to see you. My stomach dropped. How does she feel about me being here? Scared, guilty, ashamed, but also relieved, I think. She's been carrying this secret for 12 years, and it's been eating her alive. Before I could process that information fully, there was a knock on the door. Sarah went to answer it, and I heard a familiar voice that made my blood freeze. Is he here? Linda, my ex-wife, the woman who'd spent 12 years painting me as a monster, was standing on the other side of the door asking to see me. Come in, Mom. Linda walked into the room, and for a moment we just stared at each other. She looked older, obviously, but good. Her hair was shorter and had some gray in it, but she carried herself with the confidence of someone who'd built a successful life. She was wearing a navy blue dress that probably cost more than my car, and her wedding ring caught the light when she raised her hand to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear. Hello, David. Linda. We stood there looking at each other across 12 years of hurt and anger and misunderstanding. 2 people who'd once loved each other enough to create 2 beautiful children, and who'd somehow turned that love into something poisonous. I owe you an apology, she said finally. A big one. You don't owe me anything on Sarah's wedding day. Yes, I do. I owe you 12 years' worth of apologies, and I owe our children the truth about what really happened. Sarah moved to stand between us, like a referee preparing to break up a fight. Maybe we should save this conversation for after the wedding, she suggested. No, Linda said firmly. I've been putting off this conversation for 12 years, and I'm not putting it off anymore. She looked directly at me, and I could see tears starting to form in her eyes. I was wrong. About everything. About the custody fight. About poisoning the kids against you. About telling them you didn't care about them. I was wrong, and I'm sorry. Why? The question came out harsher than I'd intended. Why did you do it? We loved each other once. I thought we wanted the same things for our kids. Because I was scared. Because your job terrified me every single day and I couldn't handle the thought of the kids losing you in a fire. Because I was selfish and wanted a guarantee that my new family would work, and I thought that meant erasing the old one. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, smearing her carefully applied makeup. Because I was young and stupid, and convinced myself that what I was doing was protecting them, when really, I was protecting myself. You could have just talked to me. We could have worked something out. I know that now. Carlos has been telling me for years that I should contact you, should tell the kids the truth. But I was too proud, too scared of admitting what I'd done. And now? Now our daughter is getting married, and she asked me point blank why I'd lied to her about her father for 12 years. And I finally had to face the fact that I'd stolen something precious from all of us. Sarah started crying again, but these were different tears. Relief, maybe. Or hope. I want you to know, Linda continued, that I kept everything. Every picture, every card, every piece of evidence that you were a good father. I couldn't bring myself to throw it away, even when I was telling the kids you didn't care about them. I saw the scrapbook. I looked at it every year on their birthdays. I'd remember how happy you were when they were born, how proud you were of every little thing they did, and I'd hate myself a little more. Linda, I'm not looking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I'm just trying to make sure our children know the truth before it's too late. A knock on the door interrupted us. Sarah went to answer it, and in walked a young man who took my breath away. He was tall, probably 6'2", with dark hair and my eyes and my mother's stubborn chin. Michael. Dad. He crossed the room in 3 quick steps and hugged me, fierce and desperate, like he was afraid I might disappear again. I'm sorry, he whispered into my shoulder. I'm so sorry for all the things I said, for believing her lies, for letting 12 years go by without talking to you. You don't have anything to apologize for. You were a kid. You believed what the adults in your life told you. He pulled back and looked at me, really looked at me, like he was trying to memorize my face. Rodriguez told me about the child support, about the college fund, about the private investigators. He turned to glare at his mother. How could you lie about that? Michael, please. No, Mom, don't Michael, please me. Do you have any idea what it's been like thinking our father abandoned us? Thinking we weren't worth fighting for? Linda started crying harder, but she didn't try to defend herself. I think she'd finally run out of excuses. It's okay, I told Michael. What matters is that we're here now, that we're talking now. Is it okay? Really? Because I've spent 12 years thinking I wasn't good enough for my own father to love. That broke something in me. I grabbed my son by the shoulders and looked him in the eyes. Michael, you listen to me. You have always been good enough. You have always been worth fighting for. I have loved you every single day of your life, even when you couldn't love me back. That's not your fault, and it's not mine. It's just the way love works sometimes. We had about an hour before the wedding ceremony was supposed to start, and we spent it talking, really talking, maybe for the first time in any of our lives. Linda told the whole story, from her perspective, admitting to things I'd only suspected and apologizing for things I'd forgotten about. She told the kids about the custody battle, about how I'd fought for 2 years and spent everything I had trying to keep them in my life. She told them about the supervised visits, about how she'd made those visits as difficult as possible because she was afraid I'd convince them to come live with me. She told them about the child support I'd never missed, about the college funds she'd hidden from them, about the private investigators she'd known about but never tried to stop. Most importantly, she told them that I'd never, not once, given up on them, or stopped loving them, or chosen anything over being their father. "So why did Dad stop coming to see us?" Michael asked. Linda looked at me, then back at her son. "Because I convinced you to hate him. Because the last time he visited, you both told him you never wanted to see him again, and he loved you too much to keep forcing himself into your lives." "But he never stopped trying to take care of us from a distance," Sarah added, understanding now why she'd found her father's number in her phone contacts, why certain opportunities had seemed to appear out of nowhere when she was in college. "He never stopped being your father," Linda said, "even when I tried to erase him from your lives." By the time we had to start getting ready for the ceremony, something had shifted in our family. Not healed exactly, but cracked open in a way that might allow healing to begin. Sarah had asked me to walk her down the aisle, and Linda had agreed. Carlos, to his credit, had graciously stepped back from the role he'd been prepared to play, understanding that this was about something bigger than wedding traditions. "Are you sure about this?" I asked Sarah as we lined up outside the ceremony space. "This is your day. I don't want anything to overshadow your happiness." "Dad, having you here is my happiness. Everything else is just a party." The wedding ceremony was beautiful in the way that mountain weddings always are, with the sun setting behind the peaks and the whole world spread out below us like a promise of good things to come. Sarah looked radiant in her wedding dress, and when she smiled at me as we walked down the aisle, I saw the little girl who used to dance around our living room in her princess costume. I placed her hand in Tom's and whispered, "Take care of her. She's the most precious thing in the world." I opened the scrapbook, and my heart nearly stopped. It was full of pictures of me and the kids. But more than that, it was full of things Linda had saved. Report cards where teachers mentioned how proud I was of my children's achievements. Thank you cards I'd written to her for letting me take the kids on special outings. Even a few love letters I'd sent her during our marriage, talking about how much I loved being a father. She kept all of this. Every piece. Even the stuff that contradicted everything she'd been telling us about you. I sat down hard in the nearest chair, overwhelmed by the evidence of a love I'd thought had been completely erased. "Sarah, why are you showing me this now?" "Because I want you to know that some part of her always knew she was wrong. Some part of her never stopped loving the man who gave her the two best things in her life." "Does she know you found this?" "She knows. We had a long talk about it last night. She's here, Dad, at the wedding. She wants to see you." My stomach dropped. How does she feel about me being here? Scared, guilty, ashamed, but also relieved, I think. She's been carrying this secret for 12 years, and it's been eating her alive. Before I could process that information fully, there was a knock on the door. Sarah went to answer it, and I heard a familiar voice that made my blood freeze. "Is he here?" Linda, my ex-wife, the woman who'd spent 12 years painting me as a monster, was standing on the other side of the door asking to see me. "Come in, Mom." Linda walked into the room, and for a moment we just stared at each other. She looked older, obviously, but good. Her hair was shorter and had some gray in it, but she carried herself with the confidence of someone who'd built a successful life. She was wearing a navy blue dress that probably cost more than my car, and her wedding ring caught the light when she raised her hand to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear. "Hello, David." "Linda." We stood there looking at each other across 12 years of hurt and anger and misunderstanding. Two people who'd once loved each other enough to create two beautiful children, and who'd somehow turned that love into something poisonous. "I owe you an apology," she said finally. "A big one." "You don't owe me anything on Sarah's wedding day." "Yes, I do. I owe you 12 years' worth of apologies, and I owe our children the truth about what really happened." Sarah moved to stand between us, like a referee preparing to break up a fight. "Maybe we should save this conversation for after the wedding," she suggested. No, Linda said firmly. I've been putting off this conversation for 12 years, and I'm not putting it off anymore. She looked directly at me, and I could see tears starting to form in her eyes. I was wrong. About everything. About the custody fight. About poisoning the kids against you. About telling them you didn't care about them. I was wrong, and I'm sorry. Why? The question came out harsher than I'd intended. Why did you do it? We loved each other once. I thought we wanted the same things for our kids. Because I was scared. Because your job terrified me every single day and I couldn't handle the thought of the kids losing you in a fire. Because I was selfish and wanted a guarantee that my new family would work, and I thought that meant erasing the old one. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, smearing her carefully applied makeup. Because I was young and stupid, and convinced myself that what I was doing was protecting them, when really, I was protecting myself. You could have just talked to me. We could have worked something out. I know that now. Carlos has been telling me for years that I should contact you, should tell the kids the truth. But I was too proud, too scared of admitting what I'd done. And now? Now our daughter is getting married, and she asked me point blank why I'd lied to her about her father for 12 years. And I finally had to face the fact that I'd stolen something precious from all of us. Sarah started crying again, but these were different tears. Relief, maybe. Or hope. I want you to know, Linda continued, that I kept everything. Every picture, every card, every piece of evidence that you were a good father. I couldn't bring myself to throw it away, even when I was telling the kids you didn't care about them. I saw the scrapbook. I looked at it every year on their birthdays. I'd remember how happy you were when they were born, how proud you were of every little thing they did, and I'd hate myself a little more. Linda, I'm not looking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I'm just trying to make sure our children know the truth before it's too late. A knock on the door interrupted us. Sarah went to answer it, and in walked a young man who took my breath away. He was tall, probably 6'2", with dark hair and my eyes and my mother's stubborn chin. Michael. Dad. He crossed the room in 3 quick steps and hugged me, fierce and desperate, like he was afraid I might disappear again. I'm sorry, he whispered into my shoulder. I'm so sorry for all the things I said, for believing her lies, for letting 12 years go by without talking to you. You don't have anything to apologize for. You were a kid. You believed what the adults in your life told you. He pulled back and looked at me, really looked at me, like he was trying to memorize my face. Rodriguez told me about the child support, about the college fund, about the private investigators. He turned to glare at his mother. How could you lie about that? Michael, please. No, Mom, don't Michael, please me. Do you have any idea what it's been like thinking our father abandoned us? Thinking we weren't worth fighting for? Linda started crying harder, but she didn't try to defend herself. I think she'd finally run out of excuses. It's okay, I told Michael. What matters is that we're here now, that we're talking now. Is it okay? Really? Because I've spent 12 years thinking I wasn't good enough for my own father to love. That broke something in me. I grabbed my son by the shoulders and looked him in the eyes. Michael, you listen to me. You have always been good enough. You have always been worth fighting for. I have loved you every single day of your life, even when you couldn't love me back. That's not your fault, and it's not mine. It's just the way love works sometimes. We had about an hour before the wedding ceremony was supposed to start, and we spent it talking, really talking, maybe for the first time in any of our lives. Linda told the whole story, from her perspective, admitting to things I'd only suspected and apologizing for things I'd forgotten about. She told the kids about the custody battle, about how I'd fought for 2 years and spent everything I had trying to keep them in my life. She told them about the supervised visits, about how she'd made those visits as difficult as possible because she was afraid I'd convince them to come live with me. She told them about the child support I'd never missed, about the college funds she'd hidden from them, about the private investigators she'd known about but never tried to stop. Most importantly, she told them that I'd never, not once, given up on them, or stopped loving them, or chosen anything over being their father. "So why did Dad stop coming to see us?" Michael asked. Linda looked at me, then back at her son. "Because I convinced you to hate him. Because the last time he visited, you both told him you never wanted to see him again, and he loved you too much to keep forcing himself into your lives." "But he never stopped trying to take care of us from a distance," Sarah added, understanding now why she'd found her father's number in her phone contacts, why certain opportunities had seemed to appear out of nowhere when she was in college. "He never stopped being your father," Linda said, "even when I tried to erase him from your lives." By the time we had to start getting ready for the ceremony, something had shifted in our family. Not healed exactly, but cracked open in a way that might allow healing to begin. Sarah had asked me to walk her down the aisle, and Linda had agreed. Carlos, to his credit, had graciously stepped back from the role he'd been prepared to play, understanding that this was about something bigger than wedding traditions. "Are you sure about this?" I asked Sarah as we lined up outside the ceremony space. "This is your day. I don't want anything to overshadow your happiness." "Dad, having you here is my happiness. Everything else is just a party." The wedding ceremony was beautiful in the way that mountain weddings always are, with the sun setting behind the peaks and the whole world spread out below us like a promise of good things to come. Sarah looked radiant in her wedding dress, and when she smiled at me as we walked down the aisle, I saw the little girl who used to dance around our living room in her princess costume. I placed her hand in Tom's and whispered, "Take care of her. She's the most precious thing in the world." "I know, sir, I promise." During the ceremony, I kept looking over at Michael, who was serving as one of Tom's groomsmen. My son, who I'd watched grow up in photographs and from a distance, was now a man. He'd graduated from college, had a good job, was dating a girl he was serious about. I'd missed all of it, but he was here now, and that was what mattered. Linda sat in the front row with Carlos, and occasionally our eyes would meet. There was sadness there, and regret, but also something that might have been relief. The burden of carrying lies for 12 years had to be exhausting. The reception was held in a big tent on the resort grounds, with mountain views and twinkle lights and all the touches that make rich people's weddings look like fairy tales. I sat at a table with some of Sarah's college friends, making polite conversation and trying not to stare at my daughter as she danced with her new husband. But I kept thinking about what came next. Sarah had asked me to be part of her life again, and Michael had made it clear he wanted the same thing. But what did that look like? How do you rebuild relationships with adult children who'd lived most of their lives believing you didn't care about them? "I want you to move to Colorado," she whispered during our dance. "Sarah, I'm serious. Tom and I found a house with space for family. We want you close by for Sunday dinners and help figuring out this whole adult thing." "What about your mother? What about Carlos?" "They're part of my life too. There's room for everyone, but it'll take time to figure out how we all fit together." "And Michael?" "Michael's moving back from California next month. He got a job in Denver specifically so he could be closer to family. To all of his family." As the song ended, other couples joined us on the dance floor, including Linda and Carlos. For a moment, the four of us were dancing near each other, the parents of the bride, the adults who'd somehow made a mess of loving the same two kids. Carlos nodded at me respectfully, and I nodded back. We'd probably never be friends, but we could be civil. We could work together to support the children we'd both helped raise. Later, as the evening wound down, Linda found me standing alone on the resort's deck, looking out at the mountains and thinking about how much my life had changed in the space of 24 hours. "David, can we talk?" I turned to face her, and in the soft light from the tent, she looked like the woman I'd fallen in love with 25 years ago. "Of course. I know sorry isn't enough. I know I can't give you back 12 years, or undo the damage I did to your relationship with the kids. Linda, please let me finish. I need to say this." She took a deep breath. "You were a good husband and a good father, And I destroyed our family because I was scared and selfish. I convinced myself I was protecting the kids, but really I was protecting myself from having to deal with the possibility of losing you. You were young. We both were. That's not an excuse. I made choices that hurt people I loved, and I have to live with that. We stood in silence for a moment, listening to the music and laughter from the reception. What I want you to know, she continued, is that I never stopped regretting what I did. Every birthday, every Christmas, every time the kids accomplished something and looked around for their father, and he wasn't there because of my choices, it killed me a little more. You could have called. You could have told them the truth any time. I know, and that's what makes it worse. Every year I didn't call was another year of choosing my pride over their happiness. Another year of choosing the lie I'd built over the family I'd destroyed. A young couple walked past us, holding hands and laughing about something private. They looked the way Linda and I used to look, back when we thought love was simple and that good intentions were enough to protect the people you cared about. For what it's worth, I said, Carlos seems like a good man. The kids turned out well. You did a good job raising them. We did a good job. All of us, even when we weren't doing it together. She reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope, thick and worn around the edges. This is for you, she said. It's everything. Every report card, every school photo, every program from every play and concert and graduation. All the things I should have sent you years ago. I took the envelope with hands that weren't quite steady. It was heavier than I expected, stuffed full of 12 years of my children's lives that I'd missed in real time, but could maybe experience now, secondhand. Thank you. There's something else. The college funds you set up for them? I want to match them. Whatever you put away, I'll add the same amount. It's not about the money. It's about making sure they know we were both thinking about their futures. Linda, you don't have to. Yes, I do. It's not enough. It's not even close to enough. But it's something. Before I could respond, Sarah appeared on the deck, still in her wedding dress, but with her shoes in her hand and her hair starting to escape from its perfect style. There you are. I've been looking everywhere for you two. She looked back and forth between us, reading our faces with the intuition that children develop when their parents have complicated relationships. Everything okay out here? Everything's fine, sweetheart, Linda said. Your father and I were just talking about old times. Good old times or bad old times? Honest times, I said, which is probably the best kind. Sarah smiled and came to stand between us, linking her arms through ours like she used to do when she was little, and we were still a family. I have something to tell you both, she said. Tom and I are pregnant. 4 months along. The words hit me like lightning. My little girl, my baby, was having a baby in January. I pulled her into a hug that lasted probably longer than was appropriate for a woman in a wedding dress, but I didn't care. My daughter was married, she was happy, and she was going to make me a grandfather. I'm going to be a grandpa, I said, and I could hear the wonder in my own voice. The best grandpa, Sarah said. This baby is going to grow up knowing both of its grandfathers and all of its grandmothers, and the whole complicated, beautiful truth about how families can break apart and come back together. Does Michael know? He's the one who convinced me to tell you tonight. He said this baby should grow up in a family that tells the truth, even when it's hard. Linda was crying again, but happy tears this time. I'm going to be a grandmother. You already are one, Mom. This baby is just going to be lucky enough to have a lot of people who love them. The three of us stood there on the deck, looking out at the mountains and the stars and the future that was suddenly full of possibilities none of us had imagined that morning. I should probably get back to my husband, Sarah said eventually. He's probably wondering where his wife disappeared to. Go, I said. We'll be right behind you. She kissed both of us on the cheek and headed back toward the tent, moving carefully in her dress, but with a lightness in her step that hadn't been there before. Linda and I stood there for another minute, not talking, just existing in the space where our shared love for our children had finally overcome our shared history of hurting each other. David? Yeah? Thank you for not giving up on them. Even when I made it impossible for you to be their father, you never stopped being their father. Thank you for raising them to be people worth coming back to. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of conversations and tears and laughter. Michael and I talked until nearly midnight, catching up on 12 years of missed birthdays and graduations and girlfriends and jobs. He told me about college, about the business degree he'd gotten, partly because he remembered me talking about always wanting to understand how money worked. He told me about his job at a nonprofit in Denver, about the girl he was dating who taught elementary school and made him laugh. Most importantly, he told me about the questions he'd been asking for the past 2 years. The way he'd started to realize that Linda's stories about me didn't add up with what other people remembered. I found your old fire station, he said. Drove by there about 6 months ago and saw Rodriguez in the parking lot. He recognized me immediately. What did he tell you? Everything. About how you used to carry our pictures in your wallet and show them to everyone. About how you'd trade shifts with other guys so you could come to our games. About how after the divorce, you'd sit in the station and just stare at photos of us. Rodriguez always was a talker. He also told me about the college funds. Said you'd been putting money away for us since we were born. That even during the worst of the divorce, you never stopped planning for our futures. I thought about all the overtime shifts I'd worked, all the extra money I'd put away instead of spending it on myself. At the time, it had felt like the only way I could still be a father to children I wasn't allowed to see. He said something else that really got to me, Michael continued. He said that after we turned 18, you started volunteering at the children's hospital. That you'd go there on your days off and read to kids who were sick because being around children reminded you of what you were missing with us. I had done that, though I'd never told anyone about it. There was something about those kids, fighting battles that were so much bigger than they were, that reminded me of my own children and the battles I hadn't been allowed to help them fight. I want you to know, Michael said, that when I have kids someday, I'm going to tell them about their grandfather, the firefighter, about how he saved people's lives for a living, and how he never stopped loving his children, even when they couldn't love him back. Michael, no, let me finish. I'm going to tell them that love isn't just about being there for the good times. It's about showing up even when you're not wanted, even when it hurts, even when the people you love can't see past their own pain to understand what you're trying to give them. By the time the reception ended, we'd made plans. Real plans, with dates and phone numbers and promises that we all intended to keep. I would move to Colorado within the month, close enough to be part of my children's daily lives, but far enough away to give everyone space to adjust. Sarah and Tom would help me find an apartment, and Michael would help me move. Most importantly, we would tell the truth from now on. No more secrets. No more protecting each other from difficult conversations. No more letting fear make our decisions for us. Linda and Carlos left first, but not before Linda hugged me goodbye and whispered, "Take care of them. They need their father." I will. And Linda? They need their mother, too. Don't let guilt keep you from being part of whatever we're building here. Sarah and Tom left next, exhausted but happy, promising to call me the next day to start making plans for my move. But before they left, Sarah pulled me aside one more time. "Dad, I need to tell you something." "What's that, sweetheart?" "When I was little, after you stopped visiting, I used to dream that you'd come back. Not to fix things with Mom, but just to see me. To tell me that you still loved me. I never stopped loving you. I know that now. But for years, I thought maybe I'd done something wrong. Maybe I wasn't worth fighting for. Sarah, you have always been worth fighting for. You and Michael are the best things I've ever done with my life, and nothing will ever change that. I'm going to name the baby after you if it's a boy, David Thomas Martinez Rodriguez. That's a lot of name for a little baby. It's a lot of love for a little baby, and this baby is going to have so much love they won't know what to do with it all." Michael was the last to leave, and we spent another hour just walking around the resort grounds, talking about everything and nothing. He told me about his plans to propose to his girlfriend, about the house he wanted to buy, about the kind of father he hoped to be someday. "I want to be the kind of dad who shows up," he said, "the kind who doesn't let anything get between him and his kids." "You will be. You're already more emotionally intelligent than I was at your age." I learned that from watching what happened when people aren't emotionally intelligent, when they let pride and fear make their decisions instead of love. We exchanged phone numbers, made plans to have dinner the following week, promised to text each other regularly. All the normal things that normal fathers and sons do. Things I'd been dreaming about for 12 years. "Dad?" "Yeah?" "I'm sorry it took so long. I'm sorry I believed the lies for so long." "You were a kid. Kids believe what the adults they trust tell them. That's not your fault." "But I'm not a kid anymore, and I should have started asking questions sooner." "You asked them when you were ready to hear the answers. That's all any of us can do." I drove back to my hotel that night with my head spinning. In the space of 24 hours, my entire world had changed. I had my children back. I was going to be a grandfather. And I had a future that looked nothing like the lonely retirement I'd been planning. But more than that, I had closure. After 12 years of wondering if I'd failed as a father, if my children would be better off without me, if the love I'd tried to give them had mattered at all, I finally had my answer. Love matters. Even when it's not returned, even when it's not acknowledged, even when it's actively rejected, love matters. It creates space for healing. It builds bridges that can be crossed years later. It plants seeds that can grow even in the darkest soil. Linda had tried to erase me from my children's lives, but she couldn't erase the love I'd put there. It had been buried. It had been complicated by lies and manipulation. But it had survived. And when my children were old enough to start asking their own questions, that love had been there waiting for them. The next morning, I called Captain Rodriguez. "Dave, how did it go?" "It went better than I ever could have imagined. I told you those kids would figure it out eventually. Smart kids ask smart questions, and smart questions always lead to the truth." "Rodriguez, I need to ask you something. Why didn't you ever try to talk me into fighting harder, into hiring a better lawyer, into not giving up on the visits?" "Because you weren't giving up, brother. You were choosing to love them more than you loved being right. You were choosing their peace of mind over your own need to be acknowledged. That's not giving up. That's being a father." "But I missed 12 years. "No, you didn't. You spent 12 years loving them from a distance, setting money aside for their futures, making sure they were safe and healthy. You spent 12 years being their father even when they didn't know it. That's not missing anything. That's showing up in the only way you were allowed to." Rodriguez was right, as usual. I hadn't missed 12 years of being a father. I'd spent 12 years being a different kind of father, the kind who loves without expectation, who sacrifices without recognition, who keeps showing up even when no one sees you coming. 3 months later, I was living in Colorado, in a small apartment 10 minutes from Sarah's house and 15 minutes from Michael's. We started family therapy the next month. Forgiveness didn't arrive all at once. It showed up in small, ordinary moments. Tuesday dinners, doctor's appointments, shared looks across crowded rooms. I had dinner with one or both of them at least twice a week, sometimes more. I helped Sarah paint the nursery for the baby, taught Michael how to change the oil in his car, attended doctor's appointments and job interviews and all the mundane, precious moments that make up a life. But there were also difficult conversations, boundaries we had to establish, trust that had to be rebuilt one small gesture at a time. Linda and I developed a friendship of sorts, built on our shared love for our children and our shared commitment to not making the same mistakes again. We weren't friends exactly, but we were allies in the project of supporting our growing family. Carlos and I found our own comfortable distance. He'd raised my children when I couldn't, and I was grateful to him for that. He seemed relieved that I wasn't trying to replace him or diminish his role in their lives. There was room for all of us, it turned out. Love, when it's real, creates space instead of demanding it. The baby was born on a Tuesday in January, a healthy boy with Sarah's eyes and Tom's stubborn chin. They named him David Thomas Martinez Rodriguez, just like Sarah had promised. And when she handed him to me for the first time, I cried like a baby myself. "Hello, David," I whispered to my grandson. "I'm your Grandpa Dave. I'm going to love you forever, and I'm never going to let anyone tell you I don't." Sarah laughed through her own tears. He's going to grow up knowing exactly how much his grandpa loves him. All of his grandpas, Tom corrected. Carlos is already planning to teach him how to fish. And all of his grandmas, Linda added, reaching for the baby with arms that shook with emotion. This little boy is going to have more love than he knows what to do with. Watching Linda hold my grandson, seeing the pure joy on her face, I realized that forgiveness isn't something you do once and then it's finished. It's something you choose over and over, every time you're faced with the choice between resentment and grace. Linda had made terrible choices that cost our family 12 years of happiness, but she'd also raised my children to be kind, thoughtful adults who were capable of asking hard questions and accepting difficult truths. She'd created the space, maybe without meaning to, for our family to find its way back to each other. That spring, Michael proposed to his girlfriend Emma, and she said yes. They asked me to help plan the engagement party, and when Michael introduced me to her parents as my father, I felt like I might burst with pride. "Your father is wonderful," Emma's mother told me later. "Michael talks about you constantly, about how proud he is to be your son, about how much he's learned from you, about what it means to be a good man." "He learned that from watching his mother and stepfather too," I said. "He had good examples all around him." "Maybe. But he says the most important thing he learned from you is that love isn't just about being there for the good times. It's about showing up even when it's hard, even when you're not wanted, even when it costs you everything." Michael and Emma's wedding was held the following fall, a smaller affair than Sarah's, but just as full of love. This time, I didn't have to wonder if I belonged there. I walked Michael down the aisle, just as I'd walked Sarah, and when he hugged me afterward, he whispered, "Thanks for never giving up on me, Dad." At the reception, Linda and Carlos sat at the same table as me and my date, a nice woman named Patricia I'd been seeing for a few months. We all laughed and told embarrassing stories about Michael and Sarah, and if you'd walked into that room without knowing our history, you would have thought we were just a normal, happy family celebrating a wedding. And maybe we were. Maybe families aren't defined by the mistakes they've made or the time they've lost. Maybe they're defined by their ability to find their way back to each other, to choose love over pride, to keep showing up even when it's hard. During the father-son dance, Michael and I talked about his plans for the future, about the house he and Emma wanted to buy, about the children they hoped to have someday. "I want to be the kind of father you were," he said, "the kind who loves without conditions, who fights for his kids even when it's hopeless, who never gives up." "You'll be better than I was," I told him, "because you won't have to learn everything the hard way. You'll start with the wisdom it took me 40 years to figure out, which is that being a father isn't about being perfect. It's about being present. And sometimes being present means loving someone from a distance until they're ready to let you get close." As the evening wound down, Sarah found me on the venue's patio, holding my grandson while he slept in my arms. "He's beautiful," I said, looking down at the baby who'd made me a grandfather and changed my life all over again. "He looks like you did at that age. Mom showed me pictures." "Your mother kept pictures of me as a baby?" "She kept everything, Dad, even the stuff that hurt to look at. I think some part of her always knew she'd made a mistake, and she was saving it all for when she was brave enough to fix it." I looked through the windows at the reception, where Linda was dancing with Carlos, Michael was spinning Emma around the dance floor, and Tom was telling jokes to a table full of relatives. It looked like happiness, like the kind of family gathering I'd dreamed about for 12 years. "Do you think she was right?" I asked. "To lie to you and Michael about me? To protect you from having a father whose job was dangerous?" Sarah considered the question seriously. She was wrong to lie, but I understand why she did it. She was scared, and scared people don't always make good decisions. Are you scared? About me being back in your life? About the baby growing up knowing me? Terrified, she said with a laugh. But I'm more scared of making the same mistakes she did, of letting fear make my decisions instead of love. Little David stirred in my arms, making the soft sounds babies make when they're dreaming. I wondered what he was dreaming about, what his life would be like, whether he'd grow up in a family that told the truth even when it was difficult. You know what I learned? Sarah said. From all of this, from the lies and the truth and everything in between. What? That families aren't just the people you're born to. They're the people who choose to love you, over and over, even when you can't love them back, even when you don't know they're loving you. She was right. Carlos had chosen to love her and Michael when they needed a father figure. I had chosen to love them from a distance when that was the only option I had. Linda had chosen to love them in the only way she knew how, even when that way was flawed and hurtful. And now we were all choosing to love each other in a new way, with honesty and forgiveness and the hard-won wisdom that comes from almost losing everything. I want you to know something, I told Sarah as the baby settled back into sleep. Even if none of this had happened, even if we'd never reconnected, even if I'd died never seeing you or Michael again, it still would have been worth it. What would have been worth it? Loving you, being your father for 8 years, and then being your father from a distance for 12 more. It still would have been the best thing I ever did with my life. Sarah started crying, but they were good tears. Dad? Yeah, sweetheart? I love you too. I love you for fighting for us, for never giving up, for loving us even when we couldn't love you back. I love you for being the kind of man who saves people for a living and who never stopped trying to save us. I love you for being brave enough to ask the hard questions, for being strong enough to handle the difficult answers, for giving me a chance to be your father again. We stood there on the patio, grandfather and daughter and sleeping grandson, while inside the reception wound down and our complicated, beautiful family celebrated another beginning. Later that night, driving home to my apartment with Patricia asleep in the passenger seat, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. 12 years of loneliness and regret, and wondering if I'd failed the people I loved most. 12 years of hoping for an invitation that might never come, of loving children who'd been taught not to love me back. But it had all been worth it. Every missed birthday, every Christmas alone, every night I'd gone to sleep wondering if my children were happy and healthy and growing into good people. It had all been worth it for this moment, this second chance, this opportunity to be the grandfather I'd never gotten to be a father. The invitation to Sarah's wedding hadn't just been a piece of paper with fancy lettering. It had been a bridge across 12 years of separation, a door opening onto a future I'd stopped believing was possible. My ex-wife had told our kids that Daddy didn't care about them. At our daughter's wedding, she'd finally learned the truth, that some kinds of love are stronger than lies, more persistent than time, more powerful than the mistakes we make when we're trying to protect the people we care about. The truth was that I'd never stopped being their father. I'd just been doing it from a distance, in the shadows, with a patience born of hope and the belief that family bonds can survive separation if the love is genuine enough. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, you get the chance to step out of the shadows, to reclaim your place at the table, to hold your grandchildren, to dance with your daughter at her wedding and know that you belong there. Healing took time. Therapy sessions, missed steps, more difficult conversations than I can count. But we kept choosing each other. Sometimes love really is enough. Not always, not easily, and not without work. But sometimes. And sometimes is all you need to build a lifetime of happiness on. If this story touched your heart, please like and subscribe. Share your own experiences in the comments. Have you ever found your way back to someone you thought you'd lost forever? Your stories inspire our community,